Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Conflict Counselor podcast, where we share ideas on how to prevent disputes and navigate conflict in daily living. I'm Chris Capocia, volunteer attorney mediator at the 47th District Court in Michigan. In my career of nearly 40 years, I have mediated just about every type of dispute that could arise between people. Landlord-tenant disputes, customer-contractor disputes, employer-employee disputes, family disputes, and the list goes on. In our court mediations, I help the parties identify the issues to be resolved and the possible options for settlement. A typical session begins with a statement from the complaining party, the plaintiff, describing the harm caused by the defendant and what money damages are sought. Quite often, however, the first words from the plaintiff are, "I just wanted to be heard." The reality is that many of the conflicts in our life, especially those that end up in court, are the result of a longing to be heard that is unfulfilled. Consider a few recent examples from my docket. A major telecommunications company that would not respond to the customer's complaints of overbilling. The manager of a large apartment complex who misplaced numerous repair requests by the tenant. An auto service tech who insisted that nothing was wrong despite the customer's reports of repeated stalling of her vehicle. These cases ended up in small claims court, the People's Court, because the complaining parties had not been heard. But then something remarkable happened at mediation, where both parties had an opportunity to be heard loud and clear. The plaintiffs were noticeably relieved to be able to finally tell their stories to someone who actually listened to them. The defendants acknowledged the plaintiff's frustration, apologized for their neglect, and put forth proposals that ultimately settled the cases. So, what began as rather tense confrontations eventually became congenial collaborations after the parties' need to be heard was satisfied. Clearly, it should not have required a court action to make that happen. As an interesting aside, when a defendant doesn't show up for mediation, I grant the plaintiff a default judgment. So at that point, there is no real need for the plaintiff to be heard, right? They have their judgment. Nonetheless, I always invite the plaintiff to tell me their story, because I know they relish what is perhaps the only chance to be heard on the matter. And here's another perspective on our longing to be heard. It may manifest itself differently in more personal relationships. Consider the teenager who resorts to social media and virtual companions to get the advice, empathy, and validation that he doesn't hear from his parents. Or the spouse on the verge of divorce because her husband can't or won't hear her frustrations about running the household. We must strive to hear the hopes and dreams, the frustrations and fears of those close to us. Our failure to hear risks a permanent fracturing of these relationships. However, We must close our discussion with a caveat. Just hearing is not enough. To prevent or resolve conflict, we must be able to listen effectively to what we hear. If that sounds a bit confusing, join us next time on The Conflict Counselor as we consider the art of listening with your heart. See you then.